Stop us, we're moving full steam ahead. In the last 5 days, we've achieved ballot status in Minnesota, Vermont, Utah, Ohio, and we're waiting right now for Virginia and New York. We know we'll make it. We are united and rising. One of my favorite groups right now, the Flowbots from Denver, have a song called Rise, and in it they say, "Together we rise." For our generation knows so much pain. We are so angry, feeling infected. Please don't let anyone try to change me. We also uplift all the local Greens like Farheen and others that are running for office. Because of environmental destruction and hurricanes right now that continue to threaten our coasts, we are clear that the levees are not fixed, not only in New Orleans, but everywhere in this country. Because every day this government has chosen to spend $720 million a day on a war that kills people that look like me, my husband, and my daughter who happen to speak another language. Just today, the Labor Department reported that unemployment insurance rose to 444,000 people in this week alone. And when it comes to African American and Latino men in New York, half the African American and Latino men in New York State are unemployed. There are no jobs. In New York State right now there are over 100,000 undocumented workers who are at the mercy and will of corporations that don't care about them, and an INS system that raids their houses, arrests them, and then locks their children and wives down. Undocumented workers who farm this land and make on average $125 a week. As a Puerto Rican and a Latina woman, I do not want immigration reform, neither does the Green Party. We want full amnesty. This country has forced millions of Latin Americans to come over here, beginning with Bill Clinton's administration and the North American Free Trade Agreement and subsequent FFTA and CAFTA has forced millions of people to leave their homelands. The war of trade agreements has essentially made many refugees of Latin America. And then we xenophobically let most of these pundits on mainstream media call these my people, our people, human beings, aliens. To enforce these laws are inhumane and crimes against humanity. We in the Green Party are in solidarity with brothers and sisters in Bolivia, Venezuela, Chile, Panama, and we say hands off now, Venezuela. You won't get that oil pipeline that Sarah Palin was talking about yesterday. And let me talk a little bit about my newest vice presidential contender, Ms. Sarah Palin, from the great state of Alaska, who yesterday had the nerve to disrespect the millions of community organizers that make this country work. What would we do without community organizers? I've been a member of many groups, Malcolm X Grassroots Movement, the Reach Hip Hop Coalition. I'm a founder of the National Hip Hop Political Convention. Without community organizers, there would be right and out a domestic war right now. We try to give the people what they need, and when our budgets get cut and we're disrespected by a party, this is interesting about this Sarah Palin. This same woman who has a child that's disabled is the same woman who cut funds for poor disabled people. She's done that. This woman who has a daughter with an unintended pregnancy, who line vetoed a budgetary item that closed down a shelter for single pregnant mothers in her home state. The audacity of them to stand up there and completely lie and give us what I call a total freak show yesterday. A theater show, a circus show. That's what that was. I've been at the DNC. The Green Party is not a party of candidates that go behind cages and are protected by $50 million worth of militarized police. 77% of Minnesotans said in a survey that they would not consider voting for a third-party candidate. Where most of the people are right now, I got a chance to march at the Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign. A campaign that's full of black and white, old and poor, disabled, non-Iraq war veterans, American Indians, poor whites. And we marched for 4 hours. And when me and Sherry Hankala, the organizer, were ready to engage in what is called civil disobedience in this country, and we were going to climb that fence to serve an arrest warrant, we were told we'd be tasered and then shot by police that we paid for. I've been on the streets of Minnesota. As I said, I'm an organizer. I've organized against the murders of black and Latino men at the hands of the NYPD. So to see the hundreds of particularly young people stomped on, shot at, concussion grenades, chemical agents, the police are become militarized. We have over 300 young people right now in St. Paul, Ramsey Jail. 8 of activists being charged with domestic terrorism. So we as community organizers see the vote as very important. But tonight I will be in front of Ramsey County Jail holding vigil with those young people. And we all need to be calling right now and say this is unacceptable in this country. I've chosen the Green Party as a vehicle, and I'm humbled to be led by Cynthia McKinney, a strong African-American woman, a congresswoman for 12 years, who one day said that the Democratic Party no longer reflects my principles and values. I want to join a party that talks about social justice and economic sustainability, ecological wisdom. I want to join a party that doesn't give LGBT people civil rights. Marriage and life should never be legislated. That's a human right, and we take that as a human right, not a civil right to be legislated by the courts. And as both parties fight to keep all of us off the ballots and the debates, we have to thank Ralph and Cynthia, who don't fight over petty issues, but are fighting for the majority of the American people's needs. So as I close, I have to say, I'm incensed at how the state of Minnesota and the FBI and the CIA and the Secret Service and the National Guard, who should have been down in Gustav instead of arresting young people who are dissenting and fighting for their right to speak, who are saying as a generation, it's not about just identity anymore. We're in a battle with the elites in this country. We have to see ourselves as working class people, and we have to draw the line. That's why hip-hop comes in. Hip-hop is in your face, it doesn't back down, and it not only acts against power, we organize against power. So as we leave here tonight, we must be organized. The brutal police and militaristic state that is upon us on these raids of eyewitness, beating of Pacifica journalists like Amy Goodman and Sharif Abdul and Nicole Salazar and other journalists that have been beaten. When I felt that concussion grenade, it reminded me of 3 years ago when I was in New Orleans 10 days after the levee breach. And I said, what kind of world do I want to leave my daughter? And it makes me think about not in our name and how we say the world can't wait. And it also saddens me now that we essentially have more political prisoners. These 8 young people sitting right now with these felony domestic terrorist charges are political prisoners. They're in there for their political beliefs. And we have a criminal syndicate in the White House. A criminal syndicate that is not ever held accountable unless we hold them accountable. United Nations, the only international body we have left. We will not, as a generation, let this man sit in Crawford, Texas. Cindy Sheehan and she was here to be telling you the same thing. And as young people, when they say that we're violent, this is what we say. You're violent. Poverty is violent. Having no hair care is violent. Never-ending wars are violent. No livable wage is violent. A backdoor draft is violent. Iraqi troops coming home with no mental or health care is violent. Women in the military being raped and murdered is violent. The growing AIDS and HIV pandemic in African-American Latino communities is violent. The prison industrial complex, which 80% of prisoners are African-American and Latino men with non-violent drug charges under these mandatory Rockefeller drug laws, that's violence. That's what we do in hip-hop. We take the language back, we remix it, and we ask who are the perpetrators of violence. Not the young people in Minnesota, not the poor people, not the anti-war protesters, but the people who seek to hide behind cages. And why? Because they're afraid and they're cowards. And we're not. So together, not only do we rise, we continue to act. So, I know I took a little bit long, but that's okay. Because I often feel that particularly for young people, the way we're being portrayed by this mainstream media is violent also. And media justice has to come into everything we do now with community organizing. And we even have to question so-called public media. Bill Moyers, Jim Lair, Charlie Rose, The Nation, Ariana Huffington. Well, shame on all of you for not covering Ralph Nader, not covering Cynthia McKinney. Shame on so-called progressive people in this country that seeks to join the power elite. Because that's what they want to be. They want to be accepted. And we say in the hip-hop community that the Democrats and Republicans will always join forces. As long as they ebb and flow out of power and they take 8 years and another 4 years, they're okay. So we stand here today as the Green Party saying, we will achieve 5%. I know we'll do it. All right. And if we don't do it, it's because they stole it from us. And when they steal it from us, we'll be the first ones on the ground, as we were in Ohio, suing so that every vote, not just Green votes, but every vote is counted, especially African-American and Latino votes that they're already purging us off the polls. So we say we are not stupid, we are not afraid, we will not allow any more of this nonsense. Criminal syndicate that resides in this executive, legislative, and judicial branches of this government. The time for sitting on the fence, particularly for us as young people, is over. It's time to get up, do the work, use the vote, or even withhold it from them. Stop these greedy imperialists from spreading more death and destruction in our names. Open up the debates, open up the dialogue, open up the electorate, and close the door on this two-party system for